She lived for years without touching her husband, until the moment he finally gave in. But the millionaire is not who she thought he was, and his past hides secrets that threaten to destroy their fates. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching us from. During 5 long years, Helena and Dimitri Costa-Valença lived under the same roof, united by a marriage where touch was forbidden and intimacy, a territory never crossed. In the imposing Pedra Branca mansion, built upon the cliffs of Buzios, on the coast of Rio de Janeiro, silence was the common language between them, and each corridor of the house a whisper of something unresolved. The forbidden touch. During 5 long years, Emily and Daniel Blackwood lived under the same roof, united by a marriage where touch was forbidden and intimacy, a territory never crossed. In the imposing White Rock Manor, built upon the cliffs of Newport on the coast of Rhode Island, silence was the common language between them, and each corridor of the house a whisper of something unresolved. Emily wasn't a fragile woman. Born in Oakdale, daughter of the manor's former housekeeper, she had grown up knowing the boundaries between service and devotion. Her mother, Catherine, had dedicated 20 years of her life caring for the Blackwood family, raising Emily in the back of the property, among the bougainvillea and jasmine that perfumed the salty coastal air. When she was called back to the property 5 years earlier, Emily never imagined she would leave as the wife of the Blackwood heir. The marriage was sealed under justifications that seemed rational at the time. The family needed to protect their name after a financial scandal that shook the New England real estate market. Daniel, at 32, faced pressure from international investors who demanded personal stability to trust the family company's business. Emily, at 27, had graduated in literature from Brown University, worked as a teacher at a public school, and wrote in her spare time. When Daniel appeared at her small house in Oakdale with a proposal that would change her life forever, she accepted for one reason only: to save her mother, who was ill and needed expensive treatment. Between the lines of the matrimonial contract were implicit clauses that Emily would only come to understand with time. The marriage was only on paper. She would have an entire wing of the mansion, unlimited financial resources, but should never expect affection or physical intimacy. Daniel was clear from the beginning. It was a business arrangement, nothing more. Daniel was a man shrouded in shadows, heir to a real estate empire that had built skyscrapers throughout New England. Enigmatic, admired by some, feared by others, he hid in his eyes the pain of a tragedy never overcome: the death of his fiancée, Alexandra, found at the foot of the mansion's marble staircase on the eve of their wedding. Officially an accident, unofficially an event sealed by pacts of silence among family members. The young sociologist, daughter of a traditional family from Beacon Hill, had fallen down the stairs after an argument with Daniel, or at least that's what everyone said. Since that day, 5.5 years ago, Daniel had never touched another woman. The trauma had crystallized into an aversion to physical affection, but also into something deeper, as if loving someone was, for him, a death sentence. Emily, however, loved, not in a romantic way at first, but with the kind of love learned by observing, waiting, listening to what remained unsaid. She observed Daniel from afar, noticed how he avoided looking at her directly, how his hands trembled imperceptibly when she accidentally came near. She wrote letters she never sent, dedicated entire afternoons to tending the orchid garden that Alexandra had cultivated, and hid poems under the drawer of the writing desk in her room. She was also the author, in secret, of novels published under the pseudonym Luna Morena, stories of women who loved impossible men, of mansions that kept centuries-old secrets, of passions that defied social conventions. Her books were successful among readers throughout America, but no one knew that the mysterious Luna Morena was actually Emily Blackwood, the reclusive wife of the New England magnate. During the 5 years of conjugal silence, Emily resisted, waited, suffered silently. She created a routine that included morning walks on the private beach, piano lessons at the conservatory in town, and nights writing her novels. Daniel respected her schedule, avoided common spaces when she was present, and communicated through Margaret, the French housekeeper who ran the house. Until on the night of their 5th wedding anniversary, Emily made a decision. She placed an envelope on the mahogany dining room table, divorce papers already signed by her. She cooked with her own hands a complete dinner, grilled salmon, shrimp risotto, passion fruit mousse, wore the navy blue silk dress she had bought months before, and never had the courage to wear, and lit each candle of the silver candelabra with the resignation of someone saying goodbye to something they never had. When Daniel came down for dinner and found the table set, the envelope next to his plate, and Emily sitting in silence, something changed in the air. He took the papers, read each line, and for the first time in 5 years looked directly into her eyes. What he saw there wasn't pleading or despair. It was liberation. But Daniel didn't sign. His hands, always firm in business, trembled as he held the pen. He looked at Emily, who remained serene, delicately cutting the salmon as if this were an ordinary night. The silence stretched for long minutes, broken only by the sound of waves crashing on the rocks below. "Why now?" he asked, his voice hoarse. From speaking little in recent years, Emily placed her cutlery on the plate and finally raised her eyes. "Because I'm tired of living like a ghost in my own home. Because my mother is healed and I no longer need your money. And because—" She hesitated, took a deep breath. "Because I fell in love with someone who doesn't exist." The confession fell like a bomb between them. Daniel felt something contract in his chest, a physical pain he hadn't experienced in years. Someone who doesn't exist? "You," Emily said simply. "I fell in love with the idea of you, with the man I see when you don't know I'm watching, with the way your hands move when you play piano at dawn, thinking no one is listening, with how you care for the orchids she planted, even while pretending you don't care, with the pain you carry on your shoulders and never let anyone share." Daniel. Rose abruptly walked to the window overlooking the ocean. The moonlight illuminated his tall silhouette, his tense shoulders, his hands clenched into fists. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know Alexandra didn't die by accident," Emily said, and the words echoed through the hall like a gunshot. "I know you argued that night. I know there's something you never told anyone. And I know that's why you punish yourself, deprive yourself of any happiness, as if you were guilty of her death." He turned, his dark eyes burning with anger and pain. "You know nothing. You don't know what it's like to carry a death on your back. You don't know what it's like to love someone who is marked for death," Emily completed, also standing. "Faz, maybe I don't know, Daniel, but I know what it's like to love someone who has chosen to die while living." They stared at each other across the table, 5 years of unspoken tension vibrating in the air between them. Daniel saw Emily for Gi-Chai, the first time really saw her. The determined woman who had grown up in the shadow of his property, who had graduated against all odds, who wrote love stories while living a loveless marriage. Her brown hair loose over her shoulders, her green eyes shining with contained tears, the blue dress highlighting every curve of her body. "You can't love me," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm dangerous for any woman who comes close." "Maybe," Emily answered, slowly circling the table, "but it's too late now. I've already come close. I've already fallen in love. I've already lived 5 years in your orbit, breathing the same air, sharing the same roof, desiring the impossible." She stopped a few inches from him, close enough to feel the heat of his body, the woody scent of his cologne mixed with the smell of the sea coming through the open window. "Sign the papers, Daniel. Free me from this golden prison. Let me go before it's too late." But instead of taking the pen, Daniel raised his hand and touched her face. It was a hesitant touch, as if she were made of porcelain and might break. Emily closed her eyes, leaned into his palm, and for the first time in 5 years felt alive. "I can't," he whispered. "God forgive me, Emily, but I can't let you go." Without a word, he stepped back, took the divorce papers and walked to the stone fireplace that dominated one wall of the hall. With deliberate gestures, he threw the documents into the flames. The paper crackled, turning to ashes that rose up the chimney. Emily watched, her heart beating erratically. When he turned to her again, there was something different in his eyes. A decision made. A barrier finally broken down. "If you're going to stay," he said, his voice low and dangerous, "then it won't be like before. I can't pretend you're invisible. I can't pretend I don't see you, that I don't desire you, that I don't wake up every night imagining what it would be like to touch you." Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. "And what does that mean?" "It means you'll be my wife in truth. In every sense." He approached again, his eyes fixed on hers. "But it also means you'll be running a risk. The women I love—" He hesitated, swallowed hard. "They don't tend to have happy endings." "Maybe I'm different," Emily whispered. "Maybe I'm strong enough to break this curse you carry." Daniel smiled. For the first time in years, a sad smile loaded with dangerous promises. "I hope you are, my love. Because now that I've broken the barrier, between us there's no going back." That night, for the first time in 5 years, Daniel climbed the marble stairs leading to the second floor of the mansion. His steps echoed through the silent corridor, passing by rooms that had remained closed. For a long time, until stopping before Emily's door. He had never crossed that threshold, never invaded the sanctuary she had created for herself. Emily was standing on the balcony of the room, contemplating the ocean under the full moon's light. The salty wind made the fabric of her dress dance, and she looked like an apparition, a mermaid who had emerged from the waves to torment him. When she heard the footsteps, she turned slowly, without surprise, as if she knew he would come. "Are you sure?" she asked, her soft voice cutting through the night silence. Daniel didn't answer with words. He crossed the room, passed by the shelves filled with books, by the desk where she wrote her novels, by the photographs of her mother on the bedside table. When he reached her, he raised his hands and held her face between his palms, as if memorizing every detail. The first kiss was hesitant, almost reverent, as if he were touching something sacred. Emily felt her legs weaken, 5 years of repressed desire exploding in her chest. But when their tongues met, when he pulled her against his body, something strange happened. For a moment, Emily was no longer there. She saw disconnected fragments. Another woman in that same room, tears rolling down a face that wasn't hers, a violent argument echoing through the walls, a voice shouting, "You can't force me to do this!" And then, the terrible sound of something breaking. She pulled away abruptly, breathless, her eyes wide with fright. "What's wrong?" Daniel asked, concerned about her sudden paleness. "I don't know. For a moment I felt as if—" Emily shook her head, trying to drive away the disturbing images. "As if it weren't the first time we were together like this." Daniel tensed, his jaw tightening. "You're imagining things." "Am I?" Emily studied him carefully. "Or did you bring Alexandra to this room too?" His silence was answer enough. Emily felt a pang of jealousy mixed with something deeper, a strange sense of familiarity, as if she had known every corner of that room for much longer than she actually had. "She hated being here," Daniel finally said, his voice low. "She said the house had a heavy energy, that something terrible had happened within these walls. I thought it was her imagination." "And now?" He pulled her to him again, but this time with more urgency, as if trying to drive away ghosts with the force of his desire. "Now I just want you. Only you, Emily." When he kissed her again, this time with desperate passion, Emily surrendered, completely. She let him carry her to the canopy bed that dominated the room, let his hands explore every curve of her body, let 5 years of solitude transform into a night of intense passion. But even at the height of pleasure, even when their bodies moved in perfect harmony, Emily couldn't completely drive away the visions that haunted her. She saw female faces in the shadows cast by the moonlight, heard whispers in a language she couldn't decipher, felt presences that shouldn't be there. Daniel noticed her distraction. "Are you with me?" he asked, stopping his movements. "I am," she lied, pulling him into another kiss. "I always have been." But when they woke the next morning, entwined in the bed that smelled of jasmine and passion, Emily found something that made her freeze. Carved into the inner wood of the antique wardrobe, which had opened by itself during the night, was a name. Alexandra. Not just that. There were other names too. Carla, Beatrice, Isabel. At least a dozen female names, carved in different eras, some older than others. Daniel, she called, her voice trembling. He approached, still sleepy, but became fully awake when he saw what she was looking at. His face paled, his hands began to shake. "How is this possible?" Emily asked. "This wardrobe was locked. I've never been able to open it in 5 years." Daniel didn't answer. He ran his fingers over the engraved names as if recognizing each. His breathing became irregular. Sweat began to bead on his forehead. "Do you know these names?" Emily insisted. "Some," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "But this shouldn't be here. This shouldn't exist." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. "Why are you so afraid?" Daniel turned to her, his eyes laden with deep pain. "Because, my love, these are the names of all the women who died in this house. And now that we've touched each other, now that I've broken the vow I made on the day of Alexandra's funeral—" He hesitated, swallowing hard. "I fear your name will be the next to be carved here." What had begun as the happiest morning of Emily's, life suddenly transformed into the beginning of a nightmare she never imagined existed, and in the depths of White Rock Manor, something ancient and malevolent smiled in the shadows, satisfied to have another victim in its clutches. In the days that followed that disturbing discovery, the atmosphere of the mansion changed completely. Emily could no longer ignore the signs that had always been there, but that she had chosen not to see. Doors that opened by themselves during the night, the piano that played melancholy melodies even when there was no one in the music room, the jasmine scent that permeated the corridors on certain moonless nights. Daniel became even more protective and at the same time more distant. During the day, he could barely look at her without a shadow of panic crossing his eyes. At night, he embraced her desperately, as if it were the last time. He made love to her with an intensity that bordered on violence, whispering requests for forgiveness against her skin. Emily decided to investigate on her own. She started with the mansion's library, an imposing room on the ground floor with shelves that went from floor to ceiling, filled with old books and documents of the Blackwood family. It was there that she found the first real clue about the property's dark past. Among birth records and marriage certificates, there was a folder yellowed by time with handwritten notes. It was a diary, written by Daniel's great-grandmother, Hope Blackwood, dated 1923. The pages spoke of a curse that had plagued the family for generations, an ancestral debt that could only be paid with female blood. The women who enter this house for love, Hope had written with trembling calligraphy, are marked by the entity that inhabits here. It feeds on their vital energy, their youth, their capacity to love. One per generation must be sacrificed to maintain the family's prosperity. It is the price we have paid since my father-in-law, Augustus Blackwood, made a pact with forces he should not have invoked. Emily read with growing horror. Hope described how she had tried to break the curse, but discovered it was impossible. The entity was linked to the very structure of the house, feeding on the stones, the wooden beams, the earth on which the mansion had been built. Each dead woman strengthened the pact, guaranteeing more decades of prosperity for the men of the family. My daughter-in-law Celeste was the chosen one of this generation, the account continued, found dead in her room officially from heart problems. But I saw the marks on her neck, saw how her face was too serene, as if she had been sucked from within. The next will be my granddaughter when she marries. And then, her daughter. The cycle never breaks. Emily closed the diary with trembling hands. Now she understood why Daniel had tried to keep his distance. He knew the family history, knew the fate that awaited any woman who truly became part of the Blackwood lineage. That night, when he arrived home after a day of meetings at the office, in downtown Boston, Emily confronted him in the living room. She had the open diary on the center table, the yellowed pages illuminated by the soft light of the lamps. "How long have you known?" she asked without preamble. Daniel stopped at the O. Entrance to the room saw the diary, and his shoulders curved as if he had taken a physical blow. Always, he admitted, dropping into an armchair. My father told me the day I turned 18. He said it was my duty to protect any woman I loved by keeping her away from here. And Alexandra? Did she know? No, he shook his head. At least, not completely. She felt something was wrong but thought they were just family superstitions. I tried to end our relationship several times, but she insisted, said she didn't believe in curses. His voice broke. The night she died, I had told her everything, the whole truth. She was furious, said I was crazy, that I was using that story to avoid marrying her. Emily felt her heart tighten. And that's why you argued? She gave me an ultimatum. Either I married her immediately, or she would tell everyone I was a coward who invented stories to escape commitment. Daniel ran his hands through his hair. I said I couldn't make her take that risk. She went upstairs furious and he hesitated, breathing with difficulty. I followed her. I tried to explain again, but she wouldn't listen. She shouted that she would rather die than live without me. The silence that followed was laden with pain and regret. And then she died, Emily completed softly. That same night, I found her. Body at the foot of the marble staircase the next morning, her neck broken, but such a serene expression on her face. He looked at Emily, his eyes shining with tears. Exactly as my great-grandmother described in the diary. Emily stood up, approached him and held his hands. That's why you made that vow. That's why you never touched another woman again. I thought if I never truly fell in love, if I never consummated a relationship based on love, the curse couldn't be completed. He squeezed her hands. But then you appeared, and even trying to keep my distance, You fell in love, Emily finished, hopelessly, and now I've put you in danger. Now you're truly part of the family and the entity. He couldn't finish the sentence. Emily kissed his forehead, feeling the weight of the situation, but also a growing determination. Then we'll have to find a way to break this curse together. That's impossible, Emily. Generations have tried. Maybe, she said, thoughtful, but none of them had access to what I have. And what do you have? Emily smiled, a spark of hope shining in her eyes. I have the diaries of all of them, and I have you. Emily dove headfirst into researching the history of the Blackwood family. She spent entire days in the library, deciphering old documents, cross-referencing information between diaries from different eras, and assembling a macabre puzzle that spanned more than a century. What she discovered was even more disturbing than she had imagined. The curse hadn't started with Augustus Blackwood, Daniel's great-grandfather. Its origins dated back to the 19th century, when the first Blackwood arrived in America, fleeing from England for crimes that the documents did not specify. He established himself in the Newport region with a suspicious fortune and the determination to build an empire that would last for generations. Jonathan Blackwood was described in the accounts as a cruel and ambitious man who did not hesitate to use any means to get what he wanted. It was he who chose that rocky peninsula to build the mansion, despite warnings from local fishermen that the place was haunted. According to local legends, it had been the site of a terrible shipwreck where dozens of enslaved women had died, drowning on their way to the markets of Boston. Jonathan not only ignored the warnings, but deliberately built the mansion on one of the mass graves where the bodies had been buried. More than that, he performed a ritual to awaken the spirits of the dead, offering them the life of his own wife in exchange for eternal prosperity for his male lineage. Emily found the details of the ritual in a diary hidden behind a false wall in the library. The pages described how Jonathan had murdered Hope, not Daniel's great-grandmother, but his great-great-grandmother, who had the same name, and how her blood had sealed the pact with the hungry souls. Since then, each generation, a woman in the family had to die to feed the spirits and maintain the prosperity of the Blackwoods. The deaths were always masked as accidents or sudden illnesses, but they always happened in the same way. The victim was drained of her vital energy, leaving only a serene and empty shell. The most shocking thing was discovering that it wasn't always the wives who died. Sometimes they were daughters, sisters, sisters-in-law, any woman who was part of the family nucleus and was genuinely loved by one of the Blackwood men. The entity fed on love, on the emotional connection, on the energy that flowed between people who cared deeply for each other. While Emily absorbed these horrible revelations, Daniel tried to maintain an appearance of normality. He went to work every day, managed the family business, pretended everything was fine. But at night, when he came home and found her bent over piles of old documents, fear was stamped in his eyes. "You need to stop this," he said one night, after finding her in the library at 2 in the morning, surrounded by papers and old books. "You're becoming obsessed." "It's not obsession," Emily replied without raising her eyes from the document she was reading. "It's survival. If I'm going to die, at least I want to understand why." "You're not going to die," Daniel said with a vehemence that sounded more like desperation than conviction. "I won't let it happen." Emily finally looked at him. She noticed the dark circles under his eyes, the unshaven beard, the way his shoulders were curved by the weight he carried. "And how do you plan to protect me from something that has killed women in your family for more than 100 years? "I don't know," he admitted, dropping into a chair beside her. "But there has to be a way, there always is." It was then that Emily showed him the most important discovery of the night. It was a letter written by his mother, Isabella Blackwood, and addressed to Emily's mother, Catherine. "Your mother knew," Emily said softly, handing him the letter. "She knew about the curse, and that's why she sent my mother away when my father died." Daniel read the letter in silence, his face paling with each line. Isabella explained that she had fallen in love with the family's driver, Emily's father, but that she couldn't be with him because it would put him in danger. Instead, she decided that she would be the victim of that generation, sacrificing herself to protect the man she loved. "She chose to die," Emily continued, "but before that she wrote to my mother asking her to keep you away from me, to never let us meet, because she feared that we would fall in love," Daniel finished, his voice hoarse, with emotion. "That's why Catherine left Newport when you were 10. That's why she never wanted you to come back here." "But I came back anyway," Emily said. "And now we're exactly in the situation your mother tried to prevent." Daniel carefully folded the letter, as if it were made of glass. "My mother chose to sacrifice herself to protect your father, and you—" He hesitated, looking directly into her eyes. "Would you choose to do the same to protect me?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with terrible implications. Emily knew that if she said yes, she would be condemning herself. If she said no, she would be condemning him to carry yet another death on his conscience. "No," she said finally. "I won't choose to sacrifice myself, but I won't run away either." She leaned forward, took his hands. "I'll fight. We'll fight together because there has to be another way. And if there isn't?" Emily smiled, a mixture of determination and tenderness. "Then at least we'll have tried. And we'll have had these weeks together. Weeks that were worth more than years of solitude." That night, they made love with a desperate passion, as if each touch were a declaration of war against the forces trying to separate them. And in the shadows of the mansion, something ancient and hungry watched, waiting for the perfect moment to reap another life. From that conversation on, Emily and Daniel began working together in search of a solution. She continued researching during the day, while he used his contacts in Boston to find experts in occult history and African American religions. White Rock Manor had been built on sacred ground, and perhaps the answers lay in the traditions that Jonathan Blackwood had deliberately profaned. It was through an anthropologist friend from Harvard that Daniel got the contact of Mother Jasmine, a twist of fate that she had the same name as Emily's maternal grandmother. The priestess was known throughout Massachusetts for her wisdom and her ability to deal with cases involving disturbed spirits. When Emily suggested bringing her to the mansion, Daniel hesitated. What if she confirms what we already know? What if she says there really is no escape? Then at least we'll know the truth, Emily answered. I'd rather face reality than live in uncertainty. Mother Jasmine arrived on a rainy March afternoon, accompanied by 2 apprentices, and carrying a straw bag full of herbs, shells, and ritual elements. She was a woman of about 60, dark skin marked by time, eyes that seemed to see beyond the veil of physical reality. As soon as she set foot in the mansion, her countenance changed completely. "This place is heavy," she murmured, passing her hands through the air as if touching something invisible. "Very heavy. How many have died here?" "We don't know for sure," Emily answered. "Perhaps 30, 40 women over more than 100 years. The priestess shook her head sadly. "It's not just the family women. There are other presences here, much older ones." She walked through the house, stopping at certain points, whispering prayers in Yoruba. When she reached the location of what had once been the wine cellar, in the basement of the mansion, she stopped abruptly. "Here," she said. "It was here that everything began." They descended together to the damp, dimly lit basement. Mother Jasmine took a candle from her bag, lit it, and the weak light revealed something that Emily and Daniel had never noticed before. Strange symbols carved into the stone walls, forming a perfect circle in the center of the room. "Your ancestor didn't just build on sacred ground," explained the priestess, kneeling in the center of the circle. "He made a death offering. He offered innocent blood to awaken the spirits that slept in this land, but not to give them peace, to enslave them." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. Enslave the dead? The spirits of the women who died in the shipwreck were slaves, who came from West Africa. They had already suffered much in life, and their spirits were restless. Jonathan awakened that pain, that anger, and channeled it for his own ends. He promised them vengeance against all women who found the happiness they never had. Daniel felt his blood freeze in his veins. "And there's no way to break this?" Mother Jasmine closed her eyes, murmured a prayer, threw the shells on the floor. She studied the configuration for long minutes before answering. "There is," she finally said, "but the price is high." "What price?" Emily asked, though she feared the answer. "To break a death offering, one must offer something of equivalent value to what was originally promised. Jonathan offered generations of female suffering. To undo this," she hesitated, looking directly at Daniel, "a man of the Blackwood lineage must voluntarily offer everything he has, his fortune, his name, his life if necessary, and a woman who truly loves him must accept to share that sacrifice." "I would do that," Daniel said immediately. "I would give everything to protect Emily." "And you?" Mother Jasmine asked Emily. "Would you be willing to lose everything, wealth, comfort, even life, to save not only yourself, but all the women who could be victims in the future?" Emily didn't hesitate. "Yes." The priestess smiled for the first time since she'd arrived. "Then there is hope. But before we begin the reparation ritual, I need to show you something that will change everything you think you know about this curse." She led them back to the main floor and asked to see the room where Alexandra had died. Daniel was reluctant, but eventually gave in. When they reached the room that had remained locked for 5.5 years, Mother Jasmine asked them to open the windows and lit several candles. "She didn't die," she said suddenly. Emily and Daniel looked at each other, confused. "What do you mean?" Daniel asked. "The young woman you call Alexandra. She didn't die that night. She was transported." The priestess walked around the room, her hands following trails of invisible energy. "The spirits that inhabit this house sometimes take a victim to another plane, keeping her imprisoned between life and death. She is here, but not here." "That's impossible," Daniel murmured. "I saw the body. I buried her." "You buried an empty shell. Her essence was sucked away, but not destroyed. It's being used to feed the curse." Mother Jasmine stopped in front of a wall that seemed solid, but began to murmur a prayer. Slowly, a secret door opened, revealing a staircase that descended into the depths of the house. "If you truly want to break the curse," she said, "you'll have to go down there and face not only the ancestral spirits, but also free all the women who have been imprisoned over the years, including Alexandra." Emily took Daniel's hand, feeling him tremble. "Are you ready to discover the complete truth?" He squeezed her fingers, took a deep breath, and nodded. "I am. But Emily—" He turned to her, love and fear fighting in his eyes. "If something goes wrong down there, if I can't protect you—" "We'll succeed," she interrupted him. "Together we'll succeed. And together, followed by the priestess and her apprentices, they descended the secret staircase toward the dark heart of White Rock Manor, where past and present would finally meet in a confrontation that would determine not only their fates, but the future of all generations to come after them. The secret staircase descended for meters and meters, carved directly into the living rock upon which the mansion had been built. The air grew heavier and more humid with each step, laden with a sweet and nauseating smell that Emily couldn't identify. The walls were covered with hand-carved symbols, some so ancient they seemed to have been made by the first slaves who arrived in that region. Mother Jasmine murmured constant prayers. The apprentices held elements of protection, plants, peppers, sea salt. The priestess had warned that what they would find down below would challenge everything they knew about life and death. When they finally reached the end of the staircase, they encountered a natural cave that had been transformed into something that seemed straight out of a nightmare. The ceiling was high, supported by stone pillars, sculpted with female faces in expressions of agony. In the center was a circular well filled with a viscous substance that glowed with its own light, a pale, sickly green. But what shocked Emily most was seeing human figures arranged around the well. Women dressed in clothes from different eras, Victorian, dresses, clothes from the 1920s, 1950s, even contemporary clothes. All were motionless, eyes closed, breathing slowly as if in a deep sleep. "My God," Daniel whispered, recognizing some of the women from family photographs he had seen throughout his life. "They're all here, all the women who supposedly died." "Not dead, but not alive either," confirmed Mother Jasmine. "Trapped in a state between worlds, being slowly drained of their vital energy to feed the curse. Some have been here for decades." Emily approached one of the figures and immediately recognized the blonde hair and delicate features. "It's Alexandra," she murmured. The young woman was exactly as Daniel had described her, beautiful, serene, but there was something terribly wrong. Her skin had an unnatural pallor, as if all life had been sucked from the inside out. When Emily touched her hand, it was cold as marble. "Can she still be saved?" Daniel asked, his voice laden with a guilt he had carried for years. "They all can," replied the priestess, "but for that, the ritual that feeds this abomination needs to be undone. And that means—" She looked around the cave, noticing for the first time the other presences moving in the shadows, facing those who command all this. It was then that they appeared. Spectral figures emerged from the walls of the cave, tall, ethereal women, with clothes that seemed made of water and mist. Their faces were beautiful, but distorted by the anger and suffering of centuries. They were the spirits of the slaves who died in the shipwreck, transformed into instruments of vengeance by Jonathan Blackwood. Their leader approached, and when she spoke, her voice echoed like the sound of waves breaking against rocks. "Another Blackwood brings his offering," she said, looking directly at Emily. "Another daughter of the land of suffering comes to join our sisters." "I didn't come to offer myself," Emily responded, surprising herself with the firmness of her voice. "I came to free you." The spectre laughed, a sound that froze the blood of all present. "Free? Foolish child, we don't want to be freed. We want vengeance. We want all women who found the love that was denied to us to suffer as we suffered." "But you're suffering too," Emily insisted. "Trapped here, forced to repeat a cycle of pain you didn't choose. Jonathan Blackwood used you just as he used all of us." "Silence!" screamed the spectre, and the air in the cave vibrated with her anger. "You know nothing of what you speak." It was then that Mother Jasmine stepped forward. "Sisters," she said, in Yoruba, then repeated in English. "Sisters of blood and suffering, listen to me. I come from the lands you came from. I carry within me the Axe of Yamoja, mother of the oceans that brought you here." The spirits hesitated, recognizing something in the priestess that connected them to their lost origins. "You were deceived," continued Mother Jasmine. "The white man who awakened you didn't offer vengeance. He offered eternal slavery. You became slaves again, trapped in repeating his commands for all eternity." "We have power," retorted the leader of the spirits, but there was uncertainty in her voice now. "Do you? Or do you just do what that dead man programmed you to do?" The priestess approached the glowing well. "This is not true, Akse. It's a grotesque imitation, a parody of sacred power. You've been transformed into spiritual zombies." Emily saw the exact moment when the truth hit the spirits. The hatred in their faces transformed into confusion, then horror, as they understood they had been manipulated once again, even after death. How can we free ourselves?" asked the leader, her voice now laden with despair instead of anger. "The ritual needs to be undone," explained Mother Jasmine, "but it requires voluntary sacrifice from the descendants of those who imprisoned you." She looked at Daniel. "Are you prepared to give up everything? Your fortune, your social position, even your life if the Orishas so require?" Daniel didn't hesitate. "I am." "And you?" the priestess asked Emily. "Are you prepared to join him in this sacrifice, knowing it could cost your life?" Emily looked around the cave, at the imprisoned women, at the tormented spirits, at the man she loved who had suffered so much for carrying a guilt that wasn't his. "I am," she said, "but I want to make one thing clear. I'm not doing this just for love of Daniel. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do." Mother Jasmine smiled. "Then let's begin. But know that once started, the ritual cannot be interrupted, and there is no guarantee that you will survive the process." Emily and Daniel looked at each other, communicating without words. Then, together, they approached the cursed well where everything had begun more than a century before, ready to face whatever was necessary to break, once and for all, the curse that had destroyed so many lives. The undoing ritual began at dawn. Mother Jasmine explained that they would need to work with the forces of nature. The high tide that would happen at noon would bring the energy of Yemoja necessary to purify the profaned earth. The apprentices spread white chalk around the well, creating a circle of protection, while the priestess prepared the sacred elements. Emily and Daniel were positioned on opposite sides of the well, holding hands over the viscous substance that glowed in the center. The leader of the spirits, who revealed her name was Aya, floated nearby, translating for the others what was happening. "First," said Mother Jasmine, "you must formally renounce everything that binds you to the curse. Daniel, you must give up the fortune built with blood, the name that carries this debt, the power you exercised over other lives." Daniel closed his eyes, took a deep breath. "I, Daniel Blackwood, renounce the empire built by my ancestor with the suffering of others. I give up all the goods, properties, and investments of the Blackwood family. May they be distributed among the families of the victims of this curse, among organizations that work for the freedom and dignity of women, among those who need it." His voice echoed through the cave. "I renounce the Blackwood name and accept to be known only as Daniel, a man who loves and wants to repair the errors of the past." The substance in the well began to bubble violently, as if boiling. The pale green light became more intense. "Emily," continued Mother Jasmine, "you must renounce the security this marriage offered you, the material comfort, and accept to share the consequences of your companion's choices." "I renounce," Emily said without hesitation. "I renounce the luxury, the status, the financial protection. I accept to share with Daniel whatever destiny the Orishas choose for us. But I demand that my choice has its own value. I am not here just as his companion, but as a free woman who decides to fight against injustice." A strong wind began to blow inside the cave, coming from nowhere. The imprisoned women began to move as if awakening from a long sleep. "Now," said Mother Jasmine, "you must offer something personal to the sea, to Yemoja, Mother of all waters, asking her to purify this land." She gave each of them a small vessel made of leaves. "Place here something that represents the love between you, but also the willingness to give it up if necessary." Emily took from her finger the wedding ring she had worn for 5 years, symbol of a loveless marriage that had transformed into the greatest passion of her life. Daniel did the same, also adding a ring that had belonged to his father, symbol of the lineage that was being broken. "Aya," Mother Jasmine addressed the leader of the spirits, "your sisters must choose. Do you want to continue trapped in this cycle of vengeance, or do you prefer to go to the Aurum, to the rest you have deserved for so long? Aya turned to the other spectral entities. For several minutes they communicated in a language that seemed made of wind whispers and water murmurs. Finally, she approached Mother Jasmine. "We choose freedom," she said, "but we demand a promise. The descendants of these two must swear that they will never again allow such injustice to happen, that they will use whatever power they have to protect the weak, especially women." "We swear," said Emily and Daniel in unison. It was then that the most dangerous part of the ritual began. To completely break the curse, they needed to enter the well and allow the cursed substance to touch them, directly facing the source. To have the evil power. If they were strong enough, if their love was true, the purity of their feelings would neutralize the spiritual poison. If not, "If we die," Emily said to Daniel before they entered the viscous substance, "at least we'll die together, and all these women will be free." "We're not going to die," he replied, but his voice trembled. "Not now that we've finally truly found each other." They descended together into the well. The substance was icy and seemed to burn the skin at the same time. Emily felt as if 1,000 needles were piercing her body, each negative thought she had ever had amplifying, each fear becoming real and palpable. She saw horrible visions, herself dying in brutal ways, Daniel abandoning her, her mother disowning her, all her dreams of being a writer turning into failure. The substance was trying to drain not just her vital energy, but her hope, her capacity to love. Daniel faced his own demons. He saw Alexandra accusing him of her death, saw Emily blaming him for putting her in danger, saw future generations of Blackwoods repeating the same mistakes. The guilt he had carried for years multiplied, trying to crush him. But then their hands found each other in the middle of the viscous substance, and something changed. The love between them, real, deep, based on mutual knowledge and conscious choice, began to literally shine. A golden light emanated from where their fingers touched, spreading through the substance and neutralizing its toxicity. The imprisoned women around the well began to wake completely. Alexandra opened her eyes for the first time in 5.5 years, looked around confused but alive. Other women from different eras rose, disoriented but free. The spirits of the slaves began to dissolve into light, finally able to follow their path to eternal rest. Aya was the last to depart, and before disappearing she whispered a blessing. "May your love be remembered for generations, and may never again a woman be sacrificed in the name of male greed." The well emptied completely, the viscous substance, transforming into crystalline water that reflected the light of the candles. The entire cave seemed to breathe, as if an immense weight had been lifted from its stone shoulders. Emily and Daniel emerged from the water transformed, not just physically purified, but spiritually renewed. They knew they had lost everything. They materially possessed, but gained something much more valuable: the freedom to love without fear, and the certainty that their love had broken a cycle of hatred that had lasted more than a century. The months that followed the ritual were ones of radical transformation. White Rock Manor was sold to a non-governmental organization that transformed it into a shelter for women victims of domestic violence. Emily insisted that a plaque be placed at the entrance, telling the true story of the place and honoring all the women who had suffered there over the years. Daniel kept his word to the letter. The entire fortune of the Blackwood family was distributed as promised. Part went to the families of identified victims, part to human rights and feminist organizations, and a significant amount was allocated to creating scholarships for Black women and those of humble origin to attend higher education. Emily and Daniel moved to a simple apartment in Cambridge. He began working as a sustainability consultant for small businesses, using his experience in the corporate world to help entrepreneurs committed to social justice. She continued writing, but now her novels had a different tone. They spoke of women who prevailed not just through love, but through their own strength, who transformed pain into power. The pseudonym Luna Morena gained even more prominence when Emily launched The Women of White Rock, a novel based on the true story of her family. The book became an editorial phenomenon, leading thousands of readers to reflect on the cycles of violence that still persist in American society. Alexandra, who had spent years in a limbo state between life and death, needed months of medical and psychological monitoring to readapt to the world. Emily insisted on accompanying her in this process, despite the initial strangeness of the situation. How to explain to a woman that she had been given up for dead 5.5 years ago? "I remember fragments," Alexandra told Emily during one of their conversations at the rest home where she was recovering. "I remember the argument with Daniel, being furious because he was talking about that absurd curse. Then, it's as if I had fallen into a very long and very strange dream." "You don't blame him?" Emily asked, "for not having believed him?" Alexandra smiled sadly. "How could I blame him? I wouldn't have believed it either if someone had told me a story like that. And after all we've been through, after seeing what that thing was capable of," she held Emily's hand, "you saved all of us. Not just me, but all the women who were trapped in that horrible place." Alexandra's recovery brought a complex dynamic to the relationship between Emily and Daniel. There was no jealousy on Emily's part. She understood that what Daniel had felt for Alexandra belonged to the past, to a different man from what he had become. But there was a melancholy in his eyes sometimes, a guilt that still haunted him. "She lost 5.5 years of her life because of me," he said to Emily one night as they walked along the Cambridge waterfront. 5 years, she can never get back." "You didn't know she was still alive," Emily responded, "and if we hadn't broken the curse, she would have been lost forever, along with all the others." "But if I had believed less in the curse, if I had sought help sooner—" Emily stopped walking, held his face between her hands. "Daniel, look at me. You carried a guilt that wasn't yours for years. Don't start carrying another one now. Alexandra is alive, she's recovering, and she's going to build a new life. We broke a cycle of hatred that lasted more than a century. That has to be worth something." It was during this time that Emily discovered she was pregnant. The news came as a surprise. They had taken precautions, but apparently not all plans survived the intensity of a passion like theirs. "What if the curse hasn't been completely broken?" was Daniel's first reaction upon learning of the pregnancy. "What if our daughter," Emily corrected him, placing her hand on her still flat belly, "will grow up in a world where no woman in our family will need to fear being sacrificed for male greed. She will grow up knowing that true love is about protecting, not possessing." Emily's pregnancy progressed without complications. They chose the name Hope, in honor of Daniel's great-grandmother who had tried to break the curse decades before, but also as a symbol of what it represented for them, the hope for a different future. Mother Jasmine visited Emily several times during the pregnancy, checking if there were no remnants of the negative energy that had impregnated the family for generations. "This girl will be born clean," declared the priestess during one of the visits. "Clean of any influence from the past. She will be the first Blackwood, or rather, the first of your new lineage, to grow truly free." When Hope was born, on a sunny December morning, it was as if the last knot of the curse finally untied. Emily held her daughter in her arms and felt a peace she had never experienced before. Daniel cried when he saw the girl, not from sadness or fear, but from pure joy. "She will grow up knowing she is loved by choice, not by obligation," Emily murmured to her daughter. "She will know she has the right to choose her own destiny, to love whom she wants, to be strong and independent." Alexandra was one of the first people to meet the baby. She had recovered completely and was working as a therapist, specializing in helping women who had suffered trauma. "She's perfect," she said, holding Hope carefully, "and she'll grow up in a better world because of what you did." That night, Emily and Daniel were on the balcony of their apartment, watching their daughter sleep in the crib beside them. Boston spread out below, millions of lights twinkling like earthly stars. "Do you regret it?" Emily asked. "Giving up?" "Everything." Daniel pulled her closer, kissed her hair that smelled of milk and happiness. "How could I regret it? I traded a fortune built on suffering for a life built on true love. I traded a name stained with blood for the chance to create a family based on respect and equality. Emily smiled, nestling against his chest. And I traded a marriage of convenience for a love that changed the world around us. But the story wasn't over yet. There was one last secret waiting to be revealed, one last surprise that would test once more the strength of the love they had built together. 3 years after Hope's birth, Emily received a call that would change her perspective on everything they had experienced. It was from a lawyer in Atlanta, representing an elderly woman who claimed to have important information about the Blackwood family. "Her name is Beatrice Johnson," explained the lawyer. "She's 92 years old and says her grandmother worked in the first Blackwood mansion in the 19th century. She has documents that have never been revealed." Emily and Daniel traveled to Atlanta with Hope, now a 3-year-old girl full of energy and curiosity. Beatrice received them in a simple house in a historic neighborhood, surrounded by plants and with the unmistakable smell of freshly brewed coffee. The elderly woman was physically small and fragile, but her eyes shone with a sharp intelligence. "I knew one day you would come," she said, embracing Emily as if they were old acquaintances. "My grandmother Louise made me promise I would keep these papers until someone in the family finally broke the curse." Beatrice led them to an old chest, where she kept documents dating from 1847. Among them was something no one expected: the original will of Jonathan Blackwood, different from the one that had been officially registered. "The man you know as Jonathan wasn't his real name," Beatrice revealed, reading the document carefully. "He was called James Ferguson. He was the illegitimate son of an English landowner who repudiated him. When he arrived in America, he assumed the identity of a Blackwood who had died during the journey." Emily and Daniel looked at each other, shocked. "This means that," Emily began, "that you are not true descendants of the one who made the cursed pact," completed Beatrice. "James Ferguson stole not only a name but also a history. The true Blackwood family was known for its kindness towards slaves, for trying to abolish slavery on their lands decades before the Emancipation Proclamation. But the revelation was monumental. It meant that all the guilt Daniel had carried, all the shame of the surname he had abandoned, was based on a lie. "But the curse was real," Daniel said, confused. "The deaths happened." "Yes," agreed Beatrice, "but not because of an ancestral debt of the Blackwoods. It was because James Ferguson, using the stolen name, profaned sacred ground and made a pact he had no right to make. He condemned future generations to pay for a crime that wasn't theirs." She then showed another document, a letter written by the real Hope Blackwood, the woman James Ferguson had murdered to assume her identity. The letter had been found hidden in the lining of a dress when the body was prepared for burial. "My grandmother was present when they found this letter," explained Beatrice. "Hope had discovered who James really was and tried to expose him. That's why he killed her, not for a cursed ritual." Emily felt tears roll down her face. "So all those women died, defending a name that wasn't even theirs." "But you broke the cycle," Beatrice said, smiling through her own tears. "It doesn't matter where the curse came from. You undid it with true love and genuine sacrifice. And now, I can do what my grandmother asked me to." The elderly woman rose with difficulty and went to an antique dresser, from which she took out a deed. "This is the true property of the Blackwoods, not White Rock Manor, which was built with blood, but a farm in rural Georgia, purchased with honest work. My grandmother protected it all these years, waiting for the day when the true heirs would reclaim it." Daniel was speechless. "But we renounced everything. We don't want fortunes built." "This one wasn't built with suffering," Beatrice interrupted. It was built by a family that freed their slaves decades before emancipation, that used their wealth to help others buy their freedom. It's a clean inheritance, which you deserve." The farm was located in rural Georgia, surrounded by mountains, and with a main house dating from the 18th century. When they visited the property a few weeks later, Emily immediately felt the difference in the energy of the place. There were no shadows or malign whispers there. There was peace, positive history, memories of love and kindness. "This is where Hope should grow up," Emily said to Daniel as they walked through fields where wildflowers grew freely. "Away from the city, close to nature, knowing that her family history is about justice, not exploitation. They decided to move to the farm, transforming it into a social project. The main house was restored, respecting its original architecture, but other buildings were erected to receive women victims of domestic violence and their daughters. Emily continued writing, but now also taught literacy classes to the women who came to the farm. Daniel created a sustainable agriculture program that employed not only the temporary residents of the farm, but also families from the region who needed extra income. The project became a model of solidarity economy in Georgia. Years later, when Hope was already an intelligent and determined teenager, Emily took her to visit the old White Rock Manor, now transformed into the shelter. "This is part of your history," she explained to her daughter, "the dark part that we decided to transform into light." Hope, who had inherited her mother's green eyes and her father's determination, heard the complete story for the first time. When they finished the tour of the old mansion, she asked a question that surprised Emily. "Mum, do you think your love would have been as strong if it hadn't been tested by so much adversity?" Emily thought carefully before answering. "True love doesn't need tragedy to exist, my dear, but sometimes it's through challenges that we discover how much we're capable of fighting for what we love." That night, Emily and Daniel were on the farm's porch, watching the stars that shone without competition from artificial lights. Hope slept in her room, perhaps dreaming of the future she would build for herself. "Do you think we made the right choice?" Daniel asked, putting his arm around Emily's shoulders. "Look around us," she answered. "We have a healthy and happy daughter, a property that helps dozens of women rebuild their lives, a family history she can tell with pride. We traded a cursed fortune for a blessed life." Daniel kissed her, the same kiss that had sealed their fate years before, but now laden with peace instead of desperation. "I love you, Emily, not just for having saved me from the curse, but for having taught me that true love is about building, not possessing. And I love you for having had the courage to give up everything to start over with me," she responded, "for having proved that a man can break the toxic patterns of the past and choose to be better." And there, under the starry sky of rural Georgia, Emily and Daniel silently renewed the vows they had made years before. Not the empty vows of a convenience contract, but the deep promises of two people who had chosen to transform love into action, passion